They always said I was early to everything like it was a character flaw. I used to think it was about being prepared. Maybe it was just about giving myself time to leave if I wasn't welcome. The boots they issued me didn't squeak, but they made more sound on concrete than I remembered. I'd polished them the night before out of habit. The laces were tight enough to hold my ankles still, which felt like a kind of grace. At the checkpoint, the corporal didn't look up right away. His eyes skimmed the clipboard with a practiced motion. Name Hart. Evelyn. He ran a finger down the list, paused, went back up. Joanne Hart. Logan Hart. Marissa Hart. That's all I've got. I handed over my military ID without a word. He held it like it might smudge. I saw his pupils flinch when they landed on the seal. You, with the Hart family. I didn't answer. He already knew. He stepped to the side, radioed something quietly, a pause, then a nod I wasn't meant to see. Sorry, ma'am. There's no family listing under your name. My sleeve shifted slightly as I took back the ID. The rank bar stayed hidden. Behind the rope line they were arriving slow, composed, like something choreographed. My father's medals gleamed before his face came into focus. My mother held her purse like it was another accessory to manage not a home for anything useful. Logan had his dress blues on, pressed and proud, while Marissa walked beside him like she'd just come from a lifestyle shoot about military wives who balanced charity with curls. They passed by without hesitation. Logan caught my eye, didn't break stride. Problem with your clearance, Eve. The kind of smile that used to sit on the edge of a report card. One that knew I'd done the work, but not the right kind. The corporal shifted weight, uneasy. I can call. Don't, I said. Not sharp, just done. I moved off to the side, enough distance not to be mistaken for waiting. A family 3 rows up asked for an extra program. The woman handed one to her child and smoothed his collar. His shoes were too big, probably bought for the occasion. He looked cleaner than he looked happy. Someone handed my mother a commemorative envelope. I watched her slide it into her clutch like a dinner bill. She looked satisfied. She'd always liked paper over people. The corporal still hovered near the gate, glancing over. He didn't ask again. I stood with my hands folded at my back, like I'd done in briefings and basements in cities no one vacations in. I knew how to wait. Ceremonies have a scent, folded cloth hair, spray soap that's been rinsed, but lingers. There's always a moment when the wind changes and you smell pride. Not the good kind, the staged kind. They gave Logan the front row seat, his boots crossed under his chair with confidence. Marissa leaned over to whisper something. She was probably describing the menu at the officers' club, as if it were exclusive. They were handed 2 extra lapel pins. My father adjusted his tie twice in 60 seconds. That always meant he was pleased. No one looked my way. A woman in a silver scarf walked by and nodded at the corporal. "Is that the check-in line?" He pointed to another tent. She didn't look at me. I didn't need to be noticed, but I noticed everything. The gate guard kept glancing like I might erupt. Cry. Raise my voice. Pull rank. The usual things they fear when women stand still and don't smile. I did none of them. I watched. I watched Logan shake hands with a retired major like they were reliving shared heroics. I watched my mother place her sunglasses in her lap, aligning them with the crease of her skirt. I watched a lieutenant adjust the podium mic for my father's speech, even though everyone already knew the words. I remembered the forwarded email I'd received, no subject line, no greeting, Just a file and a sentence luncheon afterward. Dress appropriately. There were no emojis. She always added them to emails she wanted to feel warm. I could have walked away. Or in. I could have shown the corporal the line in my jacket that held the Legion of Merit ribbon. Could have let the stars flash once and watched him scramble, but that's not what this was for. Not today. Today was about watching how far they'd go to prove I didn't exist. The SUV rolled in without warning. Not fast. Just inevitable. The kind of vehicle that makes people shift before they see who's inside. The corporal straightened. Clipboard clutched like a shield. He stepped back, eyes alert. The door opened. Silence spread. General Marcus Elroy emerged. He didn't glance around. He didn't need to. His voice was soft, precise, built for rooms where people already stopped talking. Is there a problem with allowing Brigadier General Evelyn Hart into the building? Corporal. A pause. No, sir. She wasn't listed as... She's not here as family. That landed sharper than the correction. He looked at me. General, you ready? I nodded once. The corporal moved aside like furniture. I walked through the rope line. No badge. No apology. No explanation. The crowd shifted slightly, unsure what to make of the movement. The woman with the silver scarf looked again. This time, she hesitated. No one clapped. No one called out. But a few heads tilted in that subtle way people do when something doesn't match the narrative they've memorized. I didn't look at my family. They didn't turn. The breeze tugged slightly at the bottom hem of my coat. My collar stayed sharp. My hands didn't shake. The sound of my own boots again this time across a polished floor. Somewhere between the gate and the hallway, I became real. And still, I kept walking like nothing had changed because, for them, it hadn't. Not yet. Not until the name they forgot was said out loud. Not until it echoed. There was a time I answered every group text even when no one replied. I used to think presence was a form of love. Not the loud kind, not the warm kind, but something that earned you a seat. So I kept showing up. I learned how to fold napkins for Thanksgiving dinner, how to laugh at the same 4 stories my uncle told, how to keep quiet when someone made a comment that brushed too close to truth. When I joined the intelligence track, I thought maybe that would be the thing. Not flashy, not boots in the mud enough to draw envy, but respectable. Quiet, competence. My father called it an administrative angle. My mother once introduced it at a neighbor's party as defense paperwork, like I was manning a printer near a runway. I didn't correct them. I once mailed Logan a field compass with his initials etched underneath the hinge. He never mentioned it, but I saw it clipped to his belt in a photo a few months later. I took that as acknowledgement. There was a time I baked cookies from scratch, boxed them with handwritten notes, and shipped them home for Christmas. They never made it to the table. Marissa once told me later, "Oh, I thought those were from the care package company you used." I don't remember responding. I joined every family call, even from Kabul, even with a patchy satellite feed and eyes like ashtrays. I listened to updates about neighbors' dogs and school fundraisers. At the end, someone would say, "Stay safe out there," as if I were backpacking through Iceland. Once during a holiday dinner, Logan announced he was being promoted. There were champagne flutes, printed place cards, a video montage set to a country ballad. My father stood and raised his glass. "You're the future of the Hart name." I was standing behind him, balancing a tray of dishes, because the catering staff was short, and I offered to help. Marissa turned around, startled, then leaned toward me. "Oh, you're not one of the servers." I smiled. Small, just enough to move on. At my niece's recital, someone asked what I did. Before I could answer, my mother leaned in. She does intelligence, then added as if apologizing, the kind that's mostly computers. At Logan's wedding, the family slideshow didn't include a single photo of me past age 15. There was one faded and out of focus of a little girl standing next to a base gate, holding a plastic army helmet. That was me. My father told the crowd that was the year Logan decided on West Point. No one asked where I was stationed that year. Riyadh, for the record. I sent gifts for Mother's Day. Scarves, letters, a silver brooch once. She wore it once to a church service and then never again. I asked about it once. She looked confused. Oh, that was from you. I once shared a secure line call with my father while I was en route to a coordination briefing. I told him I was writing operational directives for a joint mission across 3 countries. He didn't pause. Make sure the paperwork's clean, he said. No one reads that stuff unless it's messy. That was supposed to be a compliment. I didn't argue. I nodded, even though he couldn't see it. At Logan's officer school graduation, I flew in early, took a taxi straight to the event hall, and found my name left off the guest registry. They gave me a blank name tag. I filled it in with block letters. A woman from the Wives Association offered me a seat near the back. You're with the catering team, right? I said. Nothing. Afterward, I watched Logan pose for photos with the family. My mother adjusted his collar like he was still 17. My father called out to the photographer, "Get a shot of the colonel with his legacy." I stayed by the punch bowl holding a paper cup that I never drank from. I bought them a framed satellite map, once one of the regions I'd helped stabilize through coordinated intel. I marked the key points with brass pins. It was wrapped in navy paper ribbon tied. I left it under the tree. No one opened it. The next year it was in the attic. Mason told me he saw it behind the snow gear. They thought it was an old geography project. When Logan bought his first house, I sent a bottle of whiskey engraved with the house's coordinates. He posted a picture with the caption, "Thanks to everyone who helped make this happen." I wasn't tagged. I didn't stop trying. I showed up at every dinner I was invited to, even when the seat felt borrowed. Once, during a Memorial Day weekend, I tried to explain a field report I'd written that redirected a joint unit from a compromised site. The maneuver prevented a strike on a civilian school. My father put down his fork. "Let's not pretend paperwork wins wars." He said it lightly, almost like a joke. Logan laughed. "No offense, Eve, but you make bureaucracy sound noble." I nodded, chewed slowly, and changed the subject. That night, I washed the dishes alone. My mother sat in the living room with a glass of sherry. I heard her tell Marissa, "At least Logan's on the ground. Evelyn's always been more cerebral." She pronounced it like it meant distant. Marissa asked, "Is she seeing anyone?" "No time," my mother replied, "too busy decoding." I dried each dish carefully, set them in the rack like relics. Years later, when I made full colonel, I texted a photo of the promotion pin. My father replied 2 days later, "Well done. Must be getting crowded in those admin meetings." I deleted the thread. I didn't stop calling on birthdays. I didn't stop sending books that I thought they might enjoy, or postcards from airports or articles that reminded me of a home. I never got a card in return. Sometimes I wondered if I was the only one pretending the story wasn't already written. The first time I realized no one expected me to stay was at my own going-away dinner. It was a last-minute thing. Sandwiches on the patio. My mother stood at the doorway holding a pitcher of lemonade. "Don't forget to send updates." I asked where I should send them. She looked surprised. Well, you know, if it's not classified. It always was. I looked at my hands just then. One of my knuckles was still bruised from field training. The skin was split in a way that hadn't healed right. I wore my father's old watch that day, the one he stopped wearing after his promotion. The glass had a scratch across the face, like someone tried to erase the time. I don't remember what I said, but I remember not saying everything else. Some names don't get erased, they just never get written down. There was a photo in the hallway by the dining room. The frame was brass etched with a family crest that no one could trace. Inside, my father in uniform, my mother in pearls, Logan in mid-salute, Marissa holding a toddler, Mason in cadet greys. The lighting made it look timeless. I used to stop in front of it when I passed through for holidays, waiting to see if anyone else noticed what I already knew. My place wasn't cropped out. It had never been included. I kept a file on my laptop. Heart. Archive. It wasn't neatly organized. Just loose screenshots, scanned cards, a few grainy photographs where I stood just outside the center. One was from a graduation dinner I could tell by the blue polyester tablecloths, and the way Logan's tie was slightly off-center. The message in the group chat that followed read, "Great night." All the Heart kids showed up. I hadn't spoken once that evening. I left before dessert. When I received the commendation overseas, the ceremony was held at a joint base multinational. Low lighting. No press. I wore standard dress and stood where they told me. A colonel from the Allied unit placed the medal on my chest and murmured something in his language I never translated. I nodded, shook hands, and boarded a flight at 2 a.m. There was no call from home. I hadn't mentioned it, but it had been publicly recorded. I waited to see if someone would find it. They didn't. A week later, I received an email chain titled Logan's Promotion Plus Family BBQ. It included a flyer. His name was bolded. Mine appeared once in a CC field below the message body after the signature line. No greeting, no RSVP link. I stared at that placement longer than I should have. Then I closed the laptop. The only person who reached out that week was a retired aide from an old unit. He sent a postcard. No return address. Just a sentence. Still watching the horizon. General, when I was promoted to captain, the notification came in the middle of a field operation. I radioed in the acknowledgement from a truck with a cracked windshield and an empty thermos. The pin was mailed to my station. I opened it in a supply closet. A day later, I forwarded the notice to my parents. My mother's reply came back 3 hours later. Great! Don't forget Logan's dinner this Friday. The dot at the end of that sentence lingered. There was another moment sometime after that, when Logan's wife organized a family photo session to capture the legacy. She posted it with a caption about unity. There were 10 people in the image. I wasn't one of them. My name didn't appear in the tags. I checked the comments. Someone asked if I was deployed. Marissa replied, "She's doing important things behind the scenes." I wondered if that counted as an invitation or a dismissal. I once mailed a first edition book to my father, an old strategy volume he used to reference. I inscribed it quietly, for the quiet chapters you taught me to read between. It was never mentioned. 6 months later, I saw it on a shelf in his office, behind a potted plant spine cracked but face turned away from the room. During one visit home, I noticed my high school trophies had been boxed. The shelf held Logan's academy photos, now framed in glass and aligned by year. My own portrait, taken at graduation regulation, braid lips pressed firm, had been replaced with a photo of a retired colonel's farewell speech. I'd attended that speech. I'd been the one who arranged the classified escort that got him there on time. My name wasn't listed in the official program. The wedding invitation came addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Hart Logan Marissa Mason, plus guest. No line for me, just a folded note. Of course you're invited too. I went. I didn't stay past the toast. I used to think maybe I was the only one who noticed these things. Maybe it wasn't deliberate. Maybe names just slip off lists when too many hands are typing. But omission has a texture. It doesn't sting like insult. It weighs. At my cousin's baby shower, someone passed me a blank card to fill out advice for new parents. I wrote, "Remember who stayed quiet and ask why." I left it unsigned. There were emails from my mother, brief, neutral. Recipes. Reminders about allergy season. At the bottom of one, she added, "Don't forget to send a birthday card for Mason. He really admires you." She never mentioned if he received it. I kept every note Logan ever wrote me. There weren't many. One was from years ago before a deployment. It read, "Take care. Don't get yourself killed in the spreadsheets." I'd printed it out once. It stayed folded in a folder marked personal. I opened that folder exactly twice in 5 years. General Elroy once paused during a strategy review, tapped the side of his pen, and looked up at me. "Are you ready to be seen?" I didn't answer then. Later that week I found one of the old Hart family holiday newsletters. It had a photo collage, Logan's training, Mason's new job, Marissa's fundraiser. My name appeared once beneath a caption that read, "Evelyn's still working overseas." Doing something impressive, I'm sure. That something held more dismissal than mystery. I deleted the file but kept the printout. Now and then I wonder if they remember that I was always the one behind the camera, that most of the pictures they hang came from my hands. Cropped, edited, emailed, just not signed. I never needed applause. But there's a difference between being left out and being unwritten. I looked once at a folded program from a local veterans ceremony. My father had spoken. The text described 3 generations of service. My name didn't appear, not even as a footnote. I kept that one too, just long enough to remember that I wasn't forgotten. I was avoided. There's a difference between being overlooked and being removed. The attachment came from Lindsay Roth. I hadn't heard from her in over 3 years. No greeting, no explanation. Just a file named Seating Chart 75 F and the subject line left blank. She'd once managed operations for Joint Command, then married someone in resort logistics and left it all behind. We hadn't spoken since. That made the message louder. I opened the file without expectation. Color-coded. Table assignments aligned by rank and family branch. At the center, Lieutenant Jenna Colton Hart, Rhett. Flanked by Logan Hart, Marissa Hart, and in a third seat, Mason Hart. Farther out names I hadn't seen in a decade. Spouses, colleagues, childhood friends of Logan's who still called my father, Sir. I scrolled slowly. Once. Twice. My eyes weren't tired, but I blinked anyway. There was no Evelyn. Not misplaced, not misspelled, not abbreviated, just absent. The omission was clinical, final, as if someone had pressed delete, then save. Later that day I found an email from my mother. Forwarded. No subject. No body except one line, luncheon afterward at the officers' club. Dress appropriately. There was no RSVP, no, we'd love to see you. No question of arrival, only assumption wrapped in a directive. I read it twice, then clicked back to the chart. The seat next to my father read, Logan Hart, Commanding Officer 12th Infantry Group. Below it, Marissa Hart, Event Coordination, Support. Even the spouses were credited, their presence annotated like credentials. I leaned back, letting the screen dim. My tea had gone cold on the windowsill, leaving a ring I hadn't wiped from the wood. It looked like a boundary that had never been set. 2 days later, a junior officer from the Joint Intel Division called. They needed final clearance on a citation summary. Operation Iron Relay. I confirmed the contents without hesitation. Understood, the voice said. It'll be read aloud, per directive. The silence that followed felt practiced, professional, almost kind. A colleague in Brussels sent a clip from an internal roundtable Logan's unit had been used as a case study. Positive outcome, coordination success, strategic intervention had prevented a cascade of losses in northern sectors. I'd been the one who flagged the courier routes, the one who diverted their convoy 48 hours before the attack. I never said anything. No one asked. The newsletter from Logan's division came through the following week. A glossy PDF filled with blurbs and filtered images. There was a page titled Family Strengths Behind Our Leaders, a full paragraph on Marissa and her community outreach, a side column labeled Hot Family Support Legacy, quotes from my father about leadership at home. I scrolled without searching. The absence repeated itself. At dinner, once Mason asked if I was coming to the ceremony. He said it quickly, like a formality. You'll be there, right? I glanced over. I wasn't listed. His shoulders lifted halfway to his ears. Oh. Must have been a clerical thing. They probably assumed you couldn't get away from your deployment work. He meant paperwork. But he didn't say it. Not this time. I didn't correct him. At the bottom of my closet, I kept a shoebox with old letters, field notices, deployment briefings, a faded printout from a joint commendation that never made it to the family wall. The ink had bled from humidity in one corner, but the name was still legible. Capt. Evelyn Hart. I'd once framed it, took it down the day my mother rearranged the hallway photos and skipped past my shelf. There was a Sunday when I watched Logan give a remote interview. He wore the same tie he wore to every speaking event. He spoke about discipline, readiness, family values. Growing up in a service household teaches you where duty begins. He smiled on cue. The flag behind him barely moved. No one mentioned who adjusted his flight schedule that month to avoid the strike zone. No one mentioned who filed the suppression order that kept his name out of the reports. My inbox pinged again. Another reminder from the event team. Final head count for the luncheon. My name was not in the header. Just below it, a message from Marissa. We're setting up a family photo after the reception. Same location as Logan's commissioning. Shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. I didn't reply. I hadn't been in the last one, either. In the evening, I stood in front of the mirror. My dress uniform hung from the hook behind me, freshly pressed, untouched. I traced the edge of the inner lapel where the nameplate used to sit, before I switched to the newer insignia. The fabric still carried the shape of my shoulders, though I hadn't worn it in months. I unfastened the case on the counter. The metal inside sat flush against the velvet, not yet pinned. The box was unmarked, no label, no name. Just the metal. And the weight it held. They didn't need me there. But maybe just once they should remember who I was when no one was looking. I didn't delete the invitation. I archived it. The confirmation reply was brief. No subject line. Just a line acknowledged. I will attend. No signature block. No rank. I left it that way on purpose. I didn't call. I didn't ask who compiled the list. I didn't correct anyone. Instead, I booked a room 3 miles from Fort Bexley, a business-class hotel with no ceremony rate. I used my personal email, declined the welcome basket, and requested no housekeeping. I ran my fingers along the uniform bag that hung untouched in the closet. Inside, the formal dress blues pressed structured, quietly waiting. I'd replaced the service buttons with polished brass, swapped the standard belt for a tailored version with leather trim. It wasn't for them. It was so I wouldn't second-guess my own posture. In the bottom drawer of my luggage, I kept the citation packet. 1 sheet. For exceptionally meritorious conduct in Operation Iron Relay, including leadership coordination across multinational defense and civilian systems, issued in recognition of strategic success and prevention of critical loss. There was no footnote, no family acknowledgement, no quote from a commanding officer, just the language of records, precise, cold, irreversible. I had it printed on linen paper, folded once. A coin-sized circle from my coffee mug marked the corner of my desk. I didn't wipe it. It reminded me where my hand trembled the morning I first read the draft aloud. No one else heard it. The front desk called to confirm the time for my dry-cleaned uniform return. I thanked them, then hung up without a "have a nice evening." I'd asked my assistant to check the Pentagon distribution list for the final ceremony summary, just in case the family attempted to submit an edited version. The text came back clear. You're listed accurately under individual military recognition. No grouping, no reassignment. I nodded, though no one could see. When I arrived at the hotel, I removed each badge from the velvet compartment one by one. Not to admire them. Just to be sure nothing was loose, nothing out of place. Each pin had a specific alignment. Each ribbon held the silence of days spent underground at terminals with names I never spoke again. I didn't touch the Legion of Merit until last. It rested inside its own box, red square, lined with felt. The gold and white enameled medallion glinted beneath the overhead light. The ribbon sat taut behind it, uncreased. I stared at it longer than to the others. Not for the meaning, for the weight. I remembered the man who handed it to me on the runway without ceremony. I remembered the wind, the sound of boots against concrete. No applause, just a nod. In the hotel room, no one knocked, no one sent flowers, no one asked if I was nervous. They didn't need to. I wasn't stepping forward to be seen. I was steppy. The day before the event, I sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed. The summary document lay open beside the Legion. I read it again, not to memorize it, but to own it. Not for them. For me. Coordination under high-risk conditions, multinational validation of tactical response, civilian safety thresholds met, field integrity upheld. It didn't mention the late-night reroutes, the diplomatic calls, the months of silence afterward. That part wasn't for paper. The email from my mother arrived at 6:42 p.m. Please avoid unnecessary attention. It's about your father, not you. No salutation, no punctuation at the end. I stared at the screen until it went dark from inactivity. I didn't respond. I folded the email in my mind once like the linen summary and shelved it in the quiet cabinet inside my chest labeled Do Not Disturb. That night, I lined up every piece of my uniform across the bed. I checked the seams, pressed down the lapel edges with my palm. In the center of the arrangement, I placed the Legion. Not above or below. Just there. When I reached for the buttons, I fastened them slowly. No rush. Each click like a sentence with a period. No room for negotiation. My reflection held the line. Not proud, not hesitant. Just exact. In my left hand, I held the shoulder cord. I didn't attach it. I didn't need to. Just the feel of the braid between my fingers was enough to remind me I'd worn it once under different skies, for reasons that weren't recorded. The room was still. No music, no noise from the hall. Just the hum of central air, the folded form of who I used to be laid out understood ironed flat. I didn't rehearse anything. I didn't picture their faces. I didn't hope they'd see me. I wasn't knocking on a door anymore. I was learning how to build one. And I already had the key. I didn't stay for this cake. They posed without me. I watched the reflection in the glass doors as Logan gestured people into rows. Someone called out, "Family only." No one turned to check where I stood. I stepped back before the camera clicked. The exit was quiet. The carpet didn't echo. The heels I wore left no sound behind. Now the mornings began without ceremony. No press briefings, no lanyards, no protocol books to memorize before sunrise. Just a stovetop kettle, chipped slightly at the handle, and one chipped mug I'd brought from Baghdad. The handle didn't match the design. I kept it anyway. The apartment sat 2 floors above a laundromat, 3 blocks from the library. 1 bedroom unfurnished when I moved in. I bought only what I needed. A bed. A table. A desk near the window. I chose the cactus because it didn't need much. It sat on the windowsill, thin arms reaching toward light, like it knew the difference between attention and survival. I hadn't named it. I didn't talk to plants. Most mornings I read in silence, not intelligence briefs, just old maps, footnotes on historical missteps, fragments of wars no one teaches. I used to read these things to stay ahead of command. Now, I just read. I brewed coffee, dark. No sugar, no cream. Just the weight of it in my throat, grounding. I didn't check messages while drinking it. I let the silence steep. The bookshelf stayed half empty. I liked it that way. I wasn't curating a version of myself for guests. I wasn't preparing to explain why I didn't hang family photos. No one asked. The closet held 4 pressed shirts, 2 pairs of slacks, 1 folded jacket. On a hook inside the door hung a faded field cap I hadn't worn since Jordan. The color had turned the shade of dried bone. I never put it on. Sometimes I noticed the small rituals I hadn't meant to form. The way I wiped the table twice, even when clean. The way I placed the spoon to the right, never left. The way I folded the tea towel as though inspection might arrive unannounced. There was no inspection. The mail came in brown envelopes. Most of it was bills. One came from an old logistics officer I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. A holiday card late. Inside, hope the ceremony went well. They must be proud. I left it unopened on the counter for 3 days before placing it in the drawer beside the stove. Not thrown out, just set aside. I didn't check social media. I hadn't logged in since the night of the seating chart. I didn't delete the apps. I just stopped opening them. I didn't need to see what angle of Logan's speech made the final cut. I didn't need to count likes on a photo I wasn't in. There was a folder on my laptop named For Me. It had no subfolders, just blank documents with dates as titles. I opened one, typed a location, a call sign. A number of lives extracted before fire made the zone unsalvageable. I didn't add adjectives, just the facts. I closed the file, saved without editing. That was the difference now. I no longer rewrote myself into smallness. The landlord texted once to ask if I'd hung the blinds correctly. "Your unit looks too bare from the outside." I replied, "It's functioning." He didn't follow up. Once I overheard a child in the laundromat say, "That lady doesn't have a nameplate." He meant my mailbox. It had no label, just the number 202. I didn't correct it. I hadn't told the neighbors what I did. When one asked if I worked from home, I nodded and went inside. The cactus bloomed a single red flower on a Thursday. I hadn't known it would. I didn't touch it. That evening I pulled the old duffel from beneath the bed. Inside were documents no longer needed briefing notes, outdated ID cards, a pair of gloves from Kabul. I kept the gloves. In the file labelled July 17, I wrote 2 lines. Initiated first withdrawal route, east of River Echo. Civilian caravan intact. No casualties. Then I closed the file and let the screen go black. I didn't reread anything. I didn't call anyone to say I'd started writing. I didn't even open the window. But I left the cactus there. It had colour. It didn't apologize for it. I never changed the ringtone. It was still the one set back when I thought I might need to answer quickly. 4 sharp tones, short and clipped like a command on the drill field. When it went off that morning, I didn't reach for it. I let it play twice, watched the screen blink once, then go dark. The preview lingered longer than expected. Just 1 line Reed said you left early. I made coffee without reading the rest. The spoon clicked once against the mug. I didn't stir. It took 4 hours before I opened the phone again. The full message stood there, polite, practiced, distant. Reed said you left early. We didn't get to say goodbye. Hope you're doing well. Dad says hi. No punctuation where it mattered. No question mark. Just a stack of conclusions wrapped in courtesy. I placed the phone face down. By noon, a second message appeared. Dinner invitation. Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Same restaurant as always. No reference to the award. No mention of the speech General Elroy gave with my name in full rank. No line acknowledging the part I played in Iron Relay. Instead, it'd be nice to get a few family photos we missed last weekend. I opened my laptop, not for work, but for noise. Emails from Command unread. A newsletter from the base wives group, some mix-up likely. A subject line titled Throwback Thursday, The Heart Legacy, in photos. I clicked. The screen loaded a slideshow. Logan in Cadet Blues. Marissa with her hand on Dad's shoulder. Mason holding up a vintage field map like it was heirloom silver. I looked for the frame I remembered from the ceremony, the one where I stood behind the podium beside the general, my name engraved into the medal he handed me. It was missing. In its place, Logan pinning a small badge onto Dad's chest. The caption read, "Passing the torch to the next heart generation." I didn't scroll further. That evening, Mason called. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't spoken aloud in months. I let it ring 3 times before answering. The silence stretched first, then the voice. "Mom's wondering if you have any photos from the ceremony." "In uniform, maybe I didn't move." He filled the pause with explanation. "She's doing something for the paper, the local one. They're featuring families who've served across generations. Kind of a legacy piece." I tapped the rim of my mug once, then again. "She just thought, if you have something decent, formal." I waited. "Nothing political," he added. "Just visual." She said it'd be nice to include something balanced. I held the phone closer. "Balanced." He coughed once. "You know what I mean." I didn't reply. Then he lowered his voice softer than usual. "You're still part of it. The name, I mean." I leaned back into the chair. "Which part exactly?" There was the sound of a fan whirring on his end. He exhaled. "Come on, Ev. You know what she means." I hung up. The message tone returned the next day, this time from a cousin I hadn't seen since the last funeral. She'd shared the article to a group thread. Look who made the paper. I opened the link. The headline read, "A Fort Bexley family, 3 generations in uniform." Below it, the lead photo. Dad in dress blues. Logan beside him. Marisa off to the side. Mason in front, kneeling. My shoulder, just the edge appeared at the far right of the frame, cropped at the cheekbone. No name in the caption. I closed the tab. I turned off the phone. Later that week, I received an envelope from the base communications office. Inside, a request to submit highlights from my service for the annual yearbook. It was standard. A formality, something done for high-ranking retirees or those awarded distinctions. I placed it beside the old mission folders. That night, I didn't sleep early. I read instead paragraphs from old debriefs. One line struck me more than I expected. Visibility is often a matter of permission, not merit. I underlined it. The following morning, I passed by a newsstand on my walk to the post office. The regional edition of the Military Digest featured a story on leadership transition. There, on page 3, Colonel Hart's final address draws full house. I knew the photo before I saw it. The room, the flag, the light hitting his medals, just so. Logan to his left, Mason to the right. I wasn't in it. I bought the paper anyway. Back at home, I folded it neatly, slid it into the desk drawer beside the Red Legion of Merit box. I didn't respond to the dinner invite. I didn't return Mason's call. I didn't send photos. But that night, I reopened the folder on my laptop. Not for me. This time, a new one. It was titled Things I Remember. The first file, a photo I took myself timer set outside the ceremony hall. Me, alone. Standing straight, the badge clearly visible. The caption underneath no torch was passed. I carried my own. I stopped using the word deserve. It used to follow me in quiet moments, between breaths, between names not said. But now it doesn't arrive. I wake, I work, I rest, and no part of me waits for the next gesture to prove I'm enough. I signed up for the course after reading the syllabus twice. Not because it promised healing, but because it didn't. It was clinical, methodical, post-combat cognition, and moral structure. The kind of title that tells you exactly what it is with no promise of transformation. That was what made it safe. On the first day I didn't speak. I sat in the back. My name tag had no rank. Just Evelyn. The instructor paused at my last name. He didn't ask. I didn't explain. The lectures ran through diagrams, neural pathways, moral injury, as not just guilt, but silence. He used a slide titled The Invisible Ledger, the running mental tab of what was given, received, lost, denied. I copied it word for word into my notes. That week I requested a transfer not out of spite, not as retreat, but because the current post had become a space where my name echoed differently, where it served as a footnote in a house I no longer lived in. I phrased it plainly in my submission, seeking a position aligned with operational history and current expertise. No mention of legacy, no appeal to sentiment. The acceptance came back quickly. Attached was a welcome letter from the new commanding officer. It opened with, "We're honored to have you. Your service precedes you." No one had written that before. I kept the letter folded inside the front cover of my field journal. Not as proof, just as balance. Each evening I cook something simple. Last week, lentils and rice. Tonight, egg and greens with toast. I keep the receipts, not because I need to, but because no one else pays the bills now. The mortgage, the gas, the car insurance, it's all mine. No silent deductions from anyone else's name. Nothing to hold over my head or slip into conversation. The chair in the kitchen leans slightly to one side. I've never fixed it. The imperfection keeps me from staying too long. After dinner, I wipe the table clean and place one small object in the center. Last night it was the old Hart family holiday card, creased at the corners, one edge burned slightly from a candle I let drip too low. This evening it's a patch from my first deployment. Frayed, still stiff in the middle. I rotate the symbol slowly with one finger. Sometimes the phone lights up. Never at important times. Always during a quiet moment, like it's waiting to pierce through the stillness. This morning, it was Marissa. Logan's birthday next week. Thought I'd loop you in. Nothing formal, just family. No question mark, just assumption. I replied with a period. A few days ago, I found the photo again. The one from the ceremony, the version someone tried to crop. I looked at it longer this time, my shoulder still there, blurred slightly. I printed it on matte paper, turned it over. On the back, I wrote with a fine black pen I was there. I always was. No signature. I placed it between 2 pages of a book I used to carry in the field. The binding's worn, the edges stained. Inside there's a pressed leaf I once kept for luck, dry and fragile, but still intact. This morning I drove to Fort Worth, not for duty, not for inspection, just to see. I brought nothing with me but a folder. It held my service record abridged, not the full version, just the one I kept for myself. I walked through the long hallway slowly, walls lined with portraits, smiling, saluting, clean frames, familiar poses. At the desk, a volunteer looked up. I waited until he finished his paperwork. Then I spoke. If someone wanted to donate a piece of their story, not the polished kind, not the one in the archives, but the part that saved someone's life, would that matter here? He blinked once, then nodded. I handed over the folder. He asked my name. I told him. He didn't ask if I was related to anyone. Back home, I watered the cactus near the window. It leans slightly toward the light now, a sign of something learned, not forced. I don't adjust it. Growth doesn't need symmetry. I opened my laptop. The desktop now has 3 folders. For me. Things I remember. Things I choose. I opened the last one. Typed a sentence. I did not inherit a name. I built one. Then I closed it. And let it stay closed. I never liked envelopes without creases. They look like they expect ceremony. The one I prepared was thick, but plain, weighed slightly at the bottom from the medal's case. I used a Sharpie to write the address not to anyone in particular, just the street, and number I used to memorize before I knew what silence could cost. I slipped 3 things inside. No padding. A photograph. No caption. Not smiling. My face turned slightly to the left, eyes watching the pin settle on my chest. Not the crowd. The ribbon looked sharper than I remembered. In the background, blurred uniforms. Rows of faces I'd saved. None of them looked toward the camera. Everyone had their own witness. A replica medal, same as the one I kept locked in a drawer. The clasp had a scratch from where my thumb had pressed too hard the morning of the ceremony. It stayed. I didn't polish it. A single line on cream stock paper. This is yours to remember but no longer to own. I sealed the flap without licking it. Tape held better. The woman at the post office didn't ask what was inside. She slid the envelope across the scale, printed the label, and gave it back to me to drop in the bin. I nodded. She nodded. No transaction needs words when both parties understand weight. The next morning, I returned to my desk and found the invitation. Heavy cardstock, gold foil, black serif font. Veteran Honors Banquet. In recognition of Lieutenant Colonel Evelyn Hart. My name centered in bold. Beneath it, a phrase I didn't write 3 generations of Hart legacy. At the bottom corner, family welcome to attend. I declined. I typed it myself. No assistant, no auto-signature. I respectfully withdraw from representing any family that did not privately or publicly acknowledge my name during my active service. I didn't send a second copy. I didn't check if they responded. Later that day, a message came from my mother's number. Reed said you left early. We didn't get to say goodbye. Hope you're well. Dad says hi. A follow-up arrived minutes later. We're doing dinner next weekend. Just casual. Thought it might be nice to get a family photo. Logan's bringing the twins. No mention of the ceremony. No mention of the speech. No mention of iron relay or the names that made it home because I stayed up 3 nights calibrating routes they never had to question. The phone rang around 8 p.m. I let it go to voicemail. It was Mason. Mom wants to know if you'd be willing to share a couple of pictures of you in uniform. We're putting together a scrapbook for Dad's legacy article. Silence on my end. A second later, just, if you have time. I called back the next morning. Mason picked up on the second ring. Which legacy are we honoring exactly? Pause. You know what she meant. I ended the call without response. I opened the article online that afternoon. It had already made its way to the local military blog, then reposted by the Regional Veterans Network. 3 generations of uniformed excellence. The Hart lineage. A photograph under the headline, My Father Logan Mason. All in dress blues, my shoulder just barely visible on the far edge cropped at the seam. My name not included in the caption. Just the Hart men, standing for duty. The screen dimmed after a while, like it sensed my stillness. That evening I logged into my online banking account. I found the section labeled Beneficiaries. A list appeared Logan Hart, Mason Hart, Marissa's name. Never made it there. I clicked Edit. The form refreshed. In the blank space for next of kin, I typed slowly, Tessa Wren. Not family by name. Not blood. Just someone who once left a protein bar on my bunk during a heat wave in Kandahar and didn't ask anything in return. She had lost her mother that week. I didn't ask anything either. Next, I walked to the file cabinet. Middle drawer, third tab from the back. A manila envelope marked in faint smudged ink, Hart Family Archive. It used to contain old letters, clippings from Logan's promotions, copies of speeches no one ever sent me to review. A holiday photo of everyone around the fireplace, someone's arm stretched toward the camera to take the picture, my chair missing from the lineup. I didn't flip through the contents. I held it closed with both hands, carried it to the kitchen, slid the envelope into a ceramic bowl I'd never used for food. 1 match. I struck it against the underside of a box of tea. The paper caught on the second try. Orange turned to black, the edges curled in like they'd been waiting. Names disappeared. The ink ran away from the flame like it too wanted out. I didn't open a window. When it finished, I washed the bowl, let it dry by the sink. I returned to the desk, opened a drawer, pulled out a fresh file folder. New label. No Sharpie this time. Typed, printed, laminated. Evelyn. Records that count. No subfolders. No shared access. Just mine. Inside I placed a printout of every operation I'd ever led. Each page signed. Each date correct. Each casualty line double-checked. I'd never filed them before. They'd lived in other people's citations, in other people's names. Not anymore. I didn't write a letter to explain. I didn't post online. I didn't whisper to the empty room that I was finally done. I simply wrote my name, centered, bold, unedited. Then I closed the folder, pushed my chair back and sat. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just let the air settle around me like it finally had space. I no longer wait for doors to open from the outside. The kettle clicked off with a soft tap, the kind that only matters when there's no one rushing you to respond. I poured the water into the ceramic mug with the faded second insignia. The rim had a small chip, nothing sharp enough to cut, just enough to remind me I've used it for years without replacing it. I sat by the window, folding a piece of cloth around the cup. The warmth leaked into my palm slowly the way truth does. Not sudden, not dramatic, just steady and real. The folder lay on the table, brown craft paper, labeled with my handwriting, personal narrative. Unofficial, but true. I had gone through every sheet last night, smoothing corners, redacting names. Not for secrecy, just for peace. Some names don't deserve to live in print. I'd written every operation from memory, every unrecorded conversation from the field. The days that counted, even if no medal said they did. I'd copied them neatly onto archival paper, punched holes, sealed the pages into clear sleeves. I was going to mail it to the Veterans Center that afternoon, not for validation, just to say this happened. A small note was clipped to the front. If there's room in your library for silence, here is mine. No one had asked for it. That was the point. I walked over to the shelf and slid the compass case next to his commendation plaque. It had belonged to him. The brass casing had once been dull with fingerprints, but I'd polished it last week. Not because I forgave him, just because I no longer needed the stain to feel seen. The needle didn't work anymore. It trembled when I picked it up, spun in place, then stilled in no direction. Still, I kept it. Not to remember where I'd come from, but to prove I no longer depended on it. Mason's text arrived mid-morning, a single photo bridge cable stretched over desert light. The Jordan campaign. My name never made the briefing documents, but the locals remembered. No caption, just the image. I replied with a single emoji, a steaming mug. Not flippant, just enough. The kind of response that said, I see it. I remember. And I'm fine. No one else had written in weeks. No calls, no belated congratulations, not even from Mother. The last time I saw Father, we sat beside each other at the medical facility. He fiddled with the hem of his coat. I stared at the vending machine light. No apology, no scolding. Just two people who had said everything already through silence, through omission. When the nurse came in, she said, "Your daughter will be taking care of the forms." He didn't correct her. That was all I needed. Later, I removed his name from my estate file, not out of anger, just clarity. I left the beneficiaries blank. If I ever filled them again, it would be with names that didn't flinch at mine. There was no loud announcement. I didn't post a status. No one noticed the update. That was its own kind of peace. My days are small now, but not lesser. I grocery shop in quiet aisles. I fold laundry with both hands. I take long walks where no one knows my rank. Sometimes I sit on the balcony with that same chipped mug and watch the mailman pass by. He nods. I nod back. There's a kind of dignity in not needing to be known. In the afternoon I packed the box, sealed the folder with one strip of clear tape, wrote the address of the Fort Worth Veterans Center in block letters. My own name in the top left corner was written in black pen. Just mine. Not hyphenated, not preceded by daughter of. Just Evelyn. On the bookshelf beside the window sat a frame. Not scented, not polished. The brass plate read, "Presented to Brigadier General Evelyn Hart, for service rendered where no record would show." It had been delivered months after I left. No one in my family asked where it came from. I never told them. Some things are allowed to exist without being witnessed. I opened the back cabinet, pulled out the last manila folder labeled Hart Family Archive, and slid out the contents. Photos, Christmas cards, a torn printout of a speech I'd once tried to give before being replaced by Logan on the program. I tore the folder in half, dropped it into the ceramic bowl I kept for paper ash, struck a match, let it burn. Not with ceremony, not with fury, just because it no longer needed to take up space. I watched the edges curl, listened to the soft crackle. When it was done, I carried the bowl to the sink and rinsed it clean. The water swirled dark, then disappeared. Later, I typed a new title on the blank document I'd opened before breakfast. The cursor blinked, but I didn't rush. Then, one key at a time, Evelyn. Records that count. I didn't need to write who for. I already knew. As the light softened, I stepped out onto the balcony. No shoes, no insignia, just a cotton shirt and tied back hair. The breeze touched the side of my face, carried nothing urgent. I took a sip from my cup. The tea had cooled, but I didn't mind. I leaned against the railing. No cameras, no medals, no corrections. Just me. I looked out at the fading clouds. The morning had left, but the sky hadn't closed. I breathed in. I don't need them to remember. I just need to never forget who I am.